Hey everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Megan Donnelly with AbelCine, and this is today's Creative Forces with Shana Hagan, ASC. Thanks for joining us. This is actually our first live Creative Forces of 2021, but you've probably joined us for many of these events last year. So we're happy to kick this off with Shana Hagan. Shana, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. Going live, it felt like a space launch. You were like,
Yes,
three, two, one, but
exactly.
we're here. I'm
That makes
happy
it
to be here. Absolutely thrilled.
awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. I think the live aspect makes it a little more fun, part of that live broadcast adrenaline that we have going on. So let me give you your formal introduction here so that people in our audience that aren't familiar with you can find more about you and your background. So Shana Hagan, ASC, is a filmmaker shooting documentaries, features, and episodic for over 25 years. She's a member of the American Society of Cinematographers, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the International Cinematographers Guild, the International Documentary Association, and the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. Hagan's documentary work includes Academy Award winning and nominated films, and she also just wrapped the first season of director Paul Feig's This Country series for Fox. And we're going to take a look at her work later throughout this live stream. So, Shana, that's quite a career. We're really excited to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm exhausted already. It's been a long time, but it's worth every step, every blood, sweat, and tear for sure.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to find out more about that in the next hour or so. So I always like to start off with, your background in terms of how you got started in the film industry.
Yeah. Well, I, as a young kid, was always really interested in still photography. My mom said, even as a youngster, I love to look at the world through a camera. I borrowed her Brownie camera when I was a really young kid. She also gave me a toy, a Fisher Price a camera, those little toy cameras. I loved to look at the world through a camera. I don't know what it was. Maybe just curating, just be being curious about the world, but also sort of curating. There I am, like with
I
my
love
first
that.
my first toy camera. That's me. I was just playing dress up, I guess. But I was always really interested in looking at the world through a camera. Just again, the sort of intimacy that I created with little bits of the world that were just mine. I was just sort of creating this world for myself, looking through a camera. So I was always fascinated with the camera. As I grew older, I was gifted an old 35 millimeter camera from my uncle, and I discovered kind of still photography. I taught myself the basics. In grade school, I also was loaned a Super 8 camera, and I experimented with stop motion animation, did some claymation projects as an independent study in grade school. In high school, I started to get into theatrical lighting. I worked as the lighting designer and basically the lighting crew for theatrical plays. And so, a combination of my interest in photography, my interest in movies, and my interest in lighting, sort of the natural combination of those would be cinematography. I was also very interested in movies in general. I remember a story I snuck into as a I don't even remember how old I was, but the original Blade Runner in 19, I think it was 82. I snuck in with a group of friends. We were supposed to go see some other, PG whatever movie, and we decided to go sneak into Blade Runner. And I remember sitting in the audience being so immersed in this sort of mysterious, visual, is amazing, like just immersed in this world. And it sort of a light bulb went on going, this is what filmmaking is. This is what cinematography is, creating this world to allow people to kind of travel to new and exciting places. And I was hooked, honestly hooked. I went to film school, combining all of my interests. I went to film school. I went to Loyola Marymount University, and in Los Angeles, and I again fell in love with cinematography. That program at Loyola allowed you to not only create your own projects but also work on everybody else's projects. So through a number of collaborative films, I was able to shoot other people's films. I was also responsible for my own films, which was great. And after school, I couldn't. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to shoot, but I couldn't really find a job to shoot. Being a young woman with no experience, I actually worked. I'm just getting ahead of myself, but you asked a question about how I got into filmmaking, but that was it up until college. I don't know if you want me to dive into what my first job was.
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay, great. So right out of film school, again, I had a tremendous amount of experience shooting student films, also shooting my own. I'd done documentaries, I'd done short films, features. We did one feature in most of them were shorts. In any case, here I'll tell you one thing. This helps me get get rid of my jitters. I'm used to being behind the camera and behind the. So
Right.
for me to be
Me
out
too.
front and talking about my work in a way that like I'm oftentimes I just feel much more comfortable behind the camera, but okay, I'm doing
You're
fine.
doing great. Yeah, you're doing great. And
um,
we love hearing all this information. You know what I love about your story so far, just to interrupt, is you have this like gut feeling that you wanted to be a filmmaker, you wanted to be a cinematographer, and you just knew it, is what it sounds like.
I knew like from again going back to that picture of me with the camera. I honestly I remember just the sort of the joy I felt just looking through a viewfinder. I'm not quite sure how I can articulate that beyond just having just pure joy. And so for me to explore the world through this viewfinder, and also as I got older and as I realized sort of my the joy and what
Mm.
and trying to articulate how I like and what I like to do, how why I like to do what I do. I like that, you know, and we'll get into this later about how bringing your own perspectives and your own life experiences to your work, and how everything you do and everything who you are, bringing that to your work is so important. And so I feel like that was just it was just kind of fate that you know, something that I really loved to do as a kid turns out to be my life's work and what is my profession and my career. It's just I feel very very lucky. Yes, and early on I knew almost immediately that it was something to do with photography.
Mhm.
And so out of film school, though, I was sort of dejected and I couldn't really find a job shooting. I was really, really depressed. And, you know, I couldn't really find work shooting because, you know, as a young person with no experience, who's going to hire you? I had a mentor that I met, Alan Davio, ASC. I met him
Mhm.
in film school. One of my cinematography professors had seen my work and said, "I really would like to introduce you to somebody." And that somebody happened to be Alan Davio, and he gave me his personal. My professor gave me Alan's personal number, and I said, I can't call him. You know, nobody calls just a cold call, and
Right.
you know, I said, "Look, I called him. He's fine. He's expecting your call." Sure enough, I call Alan Davio at his house. He picks up and we had a 20-minute conversation. He was lovely and said, "Call me anytime. You know, ask me any question you'd like." And I was like, you know, wow. So he invited me to sets. You know, I didn't work with Alan at all, but he was just a mentor throughout the years. And it's sad to hear him pass earlier this
Mhm.
year, but he'd been a mentor for 30 years. But out of film school, trying to find jobs shooting, I was like, okay, I have to find something that pays the bills. I ended up I interned while I was in college for a company called ZM Productions. Right out of film school, they were doing a project called Hearts of Darkness, which is the making of Apocalypse Now. For me, another influential film was Vittorio Storaro's work in Apocalypse Now. I remember seeing that in film school, like a 70 millimeter print of it, and just being blown away. You know, just amazing. You know, just incredibly immersive and visually impactful cinematography, just incredible work. And so then to be able to work on, so I was offered a job as an assistant editor on that job, on Hearts of Darkness, which was the making of Hearts of Darkness, or sorry, the making of Apocalypse Now, using footage from the making of the 1976 film. Um, I was also involved with some of the new interviews that they shot. So I shot a couple I shot a couple of these new interviews. I also was camera assistant on them, but I mainly was the assistant editor for like a year and a half of the film. And so for me to be able to, it was almost like my finishing school. I was able to watch not only the making of Apocalypse Now, watch Vittorio Storaro and Francis Coppola work through a scene and shoot it. Also look at dailies that no one else has seen. I also helped kind of find the French plantation sequence. I also made an excuse for myself to call Vittorio Storaro to get some timing notes on the French plantation, which by then nobody had seen. So it was amazing. And looking back now, I worked as an assistant editor not only on Hearts of Darkness for about a year and a half, and then I moved to National Geographic as an assistant editor. At the time, I was just again really kind of like, oh, I need to be shooting. I need to be shooting. But looking back, that time in post production, that time in editorial, seeing how a film is crafted, seeing how a documentary is crafted from the footage that has come in, it was incredibly valuable to me as a cinematographer. I use that editorial experience in my work today. And you know, every job I do, I take what I learned in the edit room and apply it to my work. I often give people and give editors, extra footage or details or wide shots, all the things that I saw editors challenged with in both National Geographic and in the Hearts of Darkness and all the other things I was on as an assistant editor. I see that work. I see my when I'm working today, I use that editorial experience that I learned on those projects. So I guess the long-winded answer to your like, yeah, or maybe it's not even a question, but I remember back right out of film school being so dejected, not being able to get a job shooting. But in hindsight, those jobs in post-production, I learned an incredible amount that I actually still use today in my work. So
Hmm.
it's
I think
it's a
that's
yeah.
such an important part of your story, and a lot of filmmakers, right? Is that, you kind of have those ups and downs of your career, and especially people starting out might feel like, oh, they're not getting where they want. And then to hear you say that looking back, it still influences your work and makes your work better, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, I tell people that I'm mentoring now, and even people that I meet, students that are sort of starting out, take a job and always focus on learning something at a job. Maybe it's not the perfect job at the moment, but you're always going to meet somebody. You're going to learn a new skill. You're gonna learn a new skill, meet a person. Expand your network. There's always something you can gain from a job. Also a paycheck, which is great, which will get you to the next thing. Another story that I like to tell when I was an assistant editor on National Geographic. I was working with two filmmakers who were very, very supportive of my career and knew I could shoot. It was important for me that everybody that I ever, any show that I was on, even if I wasn't a camera assistant or a assistant editor, I always told people, look, I would love to shoot anything. If you've got friends that are shooting anything, I want to shoot. One of the things my mentor Alan Davio said, if you want to shoot, go shoot. If you want to direct, go direct. If you want to edit, go edit. So when on the weekends, as an example, I was working with Paul and Gracie Atkins. Paul actually is an ASC member too now, and I said, look, I'm happy to work on your Great White Shark documentary as an assistant editor, but on the weekends, I actually have a project that I'm doing. Do you mind if I, on a couple occasions, take a 3-day weekend to go up to Berkeley to shoot a documentary? And they said, absolutely, go ahead. And that film turned out to be Breathing Lessons, which was the one that actually won the Oscar in 1996. So working on the weekends to shoot a film that ended up winning an Oscar was my proof to myself that I could shoot, and that it was soon after that I decided I don't necessarily need to do any assistant editing anymore. Let's just continue shooting. But I think it's important to learn something from every job, and also tell the people that are around you, the new network that you're on every job, to say, hey, this is what I'd like to do. If you know of anybody, or if you have a project coming up, let me know, and I'd be happy to help you with. So
Right.
I think there's always something beneficial about every job, even if it's not the perfect job.
Right, absolutely. I think that's a great takeaway for all of our listeners. I know when I started as a PA, that's what I would always do. I'd tell everybody what my ultimate goal was, just in case.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's important. It also helps for you. You're vocalizing your goals, and
Mhm.
I don't think it's boasting. I don't think it's, I mean, there's something also about realistic, kind of expectations, and also, just you say, I want to produce a, $30 million feature when you're just starting out. That's a little, but hey, I want to do this, or I would like to get here. Tell me, I mean, it's
Right.
just, we're in a business that I think it's a community, it's a family, it's a village. So I feel like everybody supports everybody else, and I think asking for help and asking for guidance is definitely a key part of
Mhm.
how everybody kind of gets. It's not only helping yourself, but also you're helping others. So when you get down the road, and 30 years here now, I'm able to help other people, give them a break, give them a chance. Anyway, sorry. It's about, it takes a village, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what we love to do with our Creative Forces event is touch base on things that inspired you throughout your career, and we already know that adorable picture of you with that camera there. I love. So let's take a look at some of the art and photographers, and then we'll get into filmmakers as well. That kind of along the way kept giving you that gut check of, oh, this is what I want to do. Would love
Absolutely.
to hear more about that.
Sure, sure. So this Wyeth picture, I remember, my parents used to love to take me to art museums, and I love being transported places when I see photography and art. And I remember this sort of as a younger child, remembering going to the museum, and I knew nothing about the painting or the painter. It's Andrew Wyeth, and I think it's called Christina's World. And I just remember being sort of transformed. I just wanted to find out more about her, where she is. I love the composition. just everything. It sort of sparked my interest in how engaging artwork and photography can be, in terms of bringing the viewer into a scene. And the next couple are Vermeer. This is the geographer, and then the next one's woman holding a balance. I remember going to the art museum and seeing copies or other Vermeers. And in college, I remember a cinematography teacher, who we were in a lighting class, actually discussing lighting, and he was giving us references, in beautiful art, and Vermeer was one of his favorites and absolutely one of mine. I just love the way that the light falls on these subjects, just from a single source, letting the contrast, letting the dark side just go dark, and it's beautiful and lovely. And another thing about these that I really enjoy, and I remember I've seen some Vermeer in person, I'm not sure where, but just how engaging and how sort of that light kind of just pulls you in. It's so pleasing, but it also pulls you into the scene in a way that you want to. It's almost like you're there. So I like the ability that artists and photographers can bring you places where you feel like you belong. You're sort of invited into these small little moments in life.
Absolutely.
The next couple are from, I really was interested in college and just after college into documentary photography. These first two are Gordon Parks, who is a favorite African-American documentary photographer. The next one is also really an interesting. It really started to open my mind that photographers are witnesses, but they're also bringing their own perspective and they make choices about what is in a frame and what's excluded from the frame. And again, sort of inviting you to participate in the frame in a way that is very engaging. And I really appreciate documentary cinematography in that way, that it allows you to really engage, and you again bring your own perspective into it. But these photos are, I believe, from the 60s, and this is another one, Robert Frank. Just these observational, wonderful composition, but it's just an observation of everyday life. I don't know, these photos really speak to me. I think just because these are images that we've all seen, but just to capture these little moments in history as well, I find fascinating. One of my other influences is Ansel Adams. Early on, I remember having this as a poster on my wall, and I just love the sort of attention to detail, the composition, the lighting. Ansel Adams, to me, as a still photographer, is certainly one of the great masters. No dispute there. But I just loved his compositions and his. I know you can read so much. I also appreciate his attention to detail. The textures here and the rose petals and the wood. I love that. Was again Ansel and other photographers. I loved. A lot of my work involves great detail, and I love telling stories and details. And I just love these sort of emotional attach. I don't know why a rose is just so beautiful. The simple beauty of a black and white rose. There's just the texture there that just gets me. The last one here is Dorothy Lang. She was an influential part of my life because she was a woman working in the 30s during the Depression. Taking photographs. This is taken, I believe, in Nipomo, California, of a migrant worker, woman, mother. And again, I love this image because it's so iconic. I think everybody's seen this, but for me, again, it's sort of, there's some controversy about whether this is set up or not, but whatever it is, I feel like the emotional impact of this image for me is just so instantaneous. And I love just, you want to get to know these women. You want to, this woman and her, I just feel such empathy for this woman, and it took me a few years to realize that there's actually a baby in her arms. I was so focused on her face and that the two children kind of hiding in her hands and her, just all of the sort of debris in her hair. But then it took me a while to actually realize that there's a baby in her arms. And it was interesting that I was so focused on other things other than the baby. But I just love, again, the fact that literally I'm just empathizing with this woman just from seeing this one image. And I think it wraps up the Great Depression and the struggles that people were going through in a single image. And I think it's an incredibly powerful image and still holds up today, almost 100 years later. And again, a testament to, and also a woman behind the camera, maybe having a little bit more empathy than just, it's not a news photo. There's a connection there between subject and photographer that also is pretty evident. So
those are beautiful. Thank you for sharing those. I was thinking,
sure.
as we were looking through them, being exposed to those photographs and having those reactions, emotionally and and just physically with the photo itself, do you think that that made you more interested in documentary than perhaps scripted at that time? Was there influence there?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, and people often ask that. I think a couple things. Yeah, you're right. I think there's something about my personality, and maybe I got it from both my parents, that I really connect with people very quickly. I make them feel at ease, and I empathize with people quite quickly. And I make when I'm there with a camera, I just am there, kind of fly on the wall. I love documentaries. And then there's on the flip side, I'll expand on the first part, but the second part was that again, out of film school, my first jobs as a shooter were really in documentaries. And I think people were willing to take a chance on me. Maybe there was less money riding on it. Maybe I was better suited for documentaries. Maybe I was more empathetic than maybe another candidate. But I just was drawn towards documentaries. I think also because they, I liked the idea that they could, reveal worlds to viewers that they may not know about, underrepresented groups, or, Breathing Lessons, the one that won the Oscar, was a film about a severely disabled quadriplegic man who lived in an iron lung. We just basically, it's a day in the life of what it's like to be severely disabled. And, we didn't really focus too much on the disability. It was just like, you talked about God and baseball and sex, and, it's pretty amazing. And the personal experiences that I was getting on all of these documentaries were so fulfilling,
Mhm.
that I didn't really, I didn't miss any of the scripted stuff. I was ACing all the time. I was shooting early on in the 90s. I was doing some AC work on features, on commercials, and I was not fulfilled creatively. I felt that I was, fulfilling a job and maybe going down a road that might have led me to more scripted work or more feature work. But I knew that I could shoot, and I always just had that in the back of my mind. My mentor said, if you want to shoot, go shoot. And the things that I was offered, and the things that were fulfilling me creatively, and filling my soul with purpose, were documentaries. I again feel like that. Not that there's not a purpose behind shooting a commercial or a feature, but the soul fulfilling personal experiences that I was getting shooting documentaries, it was just, they're amazing. And even today,
Right.
the work that I'm doing in documentaries is great. Is great. So I don't know. It was a combination of the opportunities that were presented
Mhm.
to me, but also personal preference about wanting to be engaged on a level that
Right.
that you know was working on something that really maybe could enact change, could affect
Right.
people enough to change. So
Absolutely. And I imagine with all your documentaries, you're learning things along the way also, just because you're such a part of the filmmaking process with the characters that you're filming, life lessons, things like that.
absolutely. I'd also love to travel. So
Mhm.
this was a great, I mean, my documentary career has taken me around the world. I have shot open heart surgery in Kazakhstan, or I'm at the top of, one of the tallest buildings in New York City overlooking Central Park. I mean, who gets to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really been an incredible life experience, and also spending. We'll talk a little bit more about Shakespeare Behind Bars later. Or it's spending a week, a month, for a year in a men's prison. Who gets to do that as a woman, getting back and spending time with guys in their cell and talking with them about how they want to be better people. I mean, it's just that connection that with individuals, and helping tell their story with authenticity and accuracy and integrity and telling the truth.
Mhm.
Feels right. It's so fulfilling. It's really great. You're right. Personal experiences are, we all want to have fun on jobs, but also I feel like there's something about fulfilling the need
Right.
for being creative, and filling your soul with things that are meaningful.
Right. Absolutely. I would love to actually take a look at some of your, we have amazing behind the scenes stills. I think now would be
Okay.
a great time to take a look at that actually before we go into some film. Avery, if you wouldn't mind
You
queuing
can
those
start
up
from the
for us.
top, probably. Yeah.
So we can just
Oh
kind of
yeah.
play these as we go along. And actually, I think we have a question from the audience. Ian, if you want to go ahead with the audience question.
Sure, thank you. Michael Thomas is asking, Shauna, what were two or three pivotal moments in your personal life that positively or not positively affected your career as a cinematographer?
Oh, interesting. Okay. Um, that's a good question. I think one, actually, a couple things. One, I'm going to do this without naming names because I don't think that's the kind of person I am. There was a feature that I was on. I was doing nights, doing second unit stunt work. Won't name the name of the feature, but it was a stunt, heavily, lots of pyro, lots of stunts, lots of. I think I was the only woman in the camera department, and I kept getting called babe and kind of honey, and I was like, it was sort of in the midst of all my assistant editing and all of my camera work. And also, I think it was after I'd shot the film that I'd won the Oscar. And it was actually at a point when I was like, okay, this is it. If this guy, the guy who was shooting, if he could shoot, I could shoot, and I also thought back to one of my role models was Brianne Murphy, who was the first woman in the ASC, the first woman in the union. And she was just like, I never met Brienne, but if she could do it, I could do it. And also, if this guy, the Yahoo, who's not treating everybody, he wasn't treating not only me poorly, but also everybody else on the set, was just such just a bad experience. I said, you know what, I'm a shooter, I'm a DP, I'm a cinematographer, and I also, when I'm shooting, I'm going to be treating people much, much better than this person. So a negative influence was actually a positive reinforcement for me that I could shoot, and I also wanted to treat people very nicely. And I saw the adverse effects, the negative effects that a guy with a really, really bad attitude had on the crew, not only me, but also the whole crew. And nobody wanted to work with him. So whenever I'm on a set, I want to make people feel respected and heard and listened to. And so that was one influence, actually, a negative influence that turned into a really positive influence for me. Let's see, another inspiration was, I sort of mentioned it before, but the fact that two filmmakers, Paul and Gracie Atkins, actually gave me days off to go and shoot breathing lessons. That support would never, I don't think my career would have advanced in the way that it did without that support. So I take that experience and I kind of apply it to my current day, and that there are times when I give people chances when they're not quite ready, but I know they're ready, but they don't have the credits for it, but let's just give them a chance. And they take it and run with it. I had an operator on This Country on the Fox show that I just finished. He was my B camera first, and he just mentioned in passing, like the second to last episode, hey, I want to operate, and here's my reel. And I was like, wow, you're really good. Why didn't you mention this sooner? And we brought him on as a C camera operator for the last couple of episodes. And he rocked it. He knocked it out of the park. So, that support, I don't know if I'm answering the question very well, but I feel like that support that I got in my early part of my career was pivotal, was influential, and life changing for sure.
That's great. I love the story of how almost a negative experience, you were able to learn from that and turn it into something positive.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, being treated so poorly, you realize the value of being treated with respect. And it took that one show to realize, okay, that was actually my last AC job. I was like, I can't do this anymore, and I moved on. And that was actually motivated me to go after what I really wanted, which was to shoot. So
that's great. So it helped you in multiple ways. Helped open up a door or continue to.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, some things that you feel like you're fighting may be the things that are kind of pushing you to areas that are a little outside your box, but pushing you outside pushing the edge of the envelope is actually a good thing. So pushing your boundaries and expanding your growth in ways that are positive for you. So, and also, again, I just just keep moving, keep growing, keep learning new things. So yeah.
I love seeing these photos because you're so in it, especially with documentary. There's that one where you're on top of the car and
yeah, that was the car one was actually on a feature. We just needed a high and wide, and it was a very low budget indie feature. We needed a high and wide, and had no ladder, no top of it. We didn't even have a camera truck. I think that was the van we were working out of. It was a feature film called Baraboo, directed by Mary Sweeney, who was David Lynch's editor and former wife, and shooting in Wisconsin in the heat of August. But yeah, we were like, oh, I'll just get up on the car. So I did.
That's great.
We got the shot. So yeah.
I love it.
I've done a fair amount of commercials as well. This was a commercial for Kohl's that was shot on The Voice. It was a cross promotion between Kohl's and The Voice, using The Voice sets and The Voice talent, but shooting for Kohl's. So these sort of integrated marketing things. And again, yes, I love operating, even on, I mean, this is not scripted, it's all documentary observational. But I love handheld. I love getting into it. I love the intimacy. I mean, like, as a kid, I love looking through the world through the camera. I think there's an intimacy that's created. Like I love shooting. I just love shooting. This is for a documentary in Brazil, following actually Walt. It's called Walt and El Grupo. I believe this camera is from AbelCine. It's an Aton XDR Prod that Ian helped me. This was back in late 2000s, I believe. We carried 2 bodies. We had some humidity issues with them, but shooting Super 16 in the late 2000s, which was amazing and great. Finding local labs to process, but we were down there for a total of about 6 weeks working on this documentary, profiling or documenting, retracing the steps that Walt Disney took on a trip he'd taken there in 1941. We went to 5 or 6 different South American countries, but pretty cool. Another shot in Rio, same film. I missed film. I missed that smell. And
I was just thinking, with your career, you've obviously seen quite a bit of technology change, but especially in the world of documentary. I mean, do you want to speak about that a little bit in terms of what's changed and maybe for the better? And we could also talk about things that you miss.
Things that I miss. Yeah. I miss taking a break every 11 minutes. That's what I miss. Shooting film, you would, even shooting handheld, you'd have a break every 11 minutes. And oftentimes here we had camera assistants, other documentaries that I was shooting on film. I didn't have an assistant, so I'd shoot 2 or 3 mags and then take a break, so that's what I miss. But the new technology actually allows you to really roll on moments that, rolling more on a film or rolling more on a scene does not necessarily mean that it's a better scene. But just it allows you to kind of record a little more freely. That said, I think I learned not only from the post-production work that I've done, and also growing up shooting film, you learn to be efficient in your storytelling. You learn to get a scene in a small amount of coverage. And because it was so expensive. I mean, it's 100 whatever a roll and that much more to process, and then you've got a telecine and all that stuff. So it sort of forced you, shooting film forces you to kind of to think efficiently when you're covering a scene. So this was again another doc when looking into the new technology. We were on a shoot, needed to be very small footprint in Lima, Peru. Shooting a story about a group of community activists that provided a recycling service for folks who were actually recycling collectors. They actually gave them dedicated routes and unionized them, which was great. So not only giving a chance for Lima to get cleaned up, but also providing some jobs and union and some skills and some respect for those who were collecting the recycling. So just a story there. But having a smaller footprint like the C300 allowed us to really get into places. I don't know. Did we show let's see, number 19? There's a shot. It might be the next one. Yeah. So having a bigger rig might not have worked in a little rig like this, but having a small footprint C300 like this, the cameras are smaller. It's sometimes great. I often prefer to have when I'm doing some follows or some real traditional verite. I like having a heavier camera on my shoulder, but oftentimes for something like this, it's nice to have a small, lightweight camera out front. So, I think the flexibility of rigs now, the options that we have are just outstanding. So you can kind of mix and match whatever camera you need for whatever you're shooting. And that's the blessing, the positive side of having so many options technically.
Absolutely. I know from our audience and our pre-questions that we have a lot of questions about, especially in documentary, how do you choose your cameras and lighting equipment and also small kits? So let's check in with Ian with our audience and see if there's a good question right now.
Thank you. Shana, this is a general question, but I think it's great for what we're talking about right now. And again, this is sort of a broad strokes question. What's in your independent documentary kit? If you're heading out for a week of filming in a variety of conditions, some unpredictable, what would you pack?
That's a hard question. First, I would say what's the budget, because that actually does dictate a lot. And also then I would say how are we traveling? Are we carrying? Are we, and also I would specifically ask what what are we shooting? Are we shooting, stuff that's in a car or in a like, I want to use the Kingmaker, where we were shooting Imelda Marcos in various situations. We were on a plane, we were in her Rolls Royce, we were on a boat, we were, and also I was doing a lot of follows. So we needed to, um, uh, have the flexibility of both worlds, having a shoulder mounted rig and then also a small rig out front. So, but I would say at least having, it's hard to say there's not one perfect rig, but I think it's important to really go down, get into the details with your directors, early on about logistics, about what you're shooting, about the content of what you're shooting. I think it's so important to collaborate early on. I mean, I think all the projects that I've done, there's if not hours and hours, there's days and days of production talk about, like a pre-production talk about what we're shooting and where, and who's carrying what, and the divvying up of the luggage and the carnets and all that kind of stuff. But the basics are certainly a body, if not two. I often carry a backup, either a backup body that's a duplicate of the A camera or a backup. So at minimum, like in my personal kit, if I just need to get up and go and do something that's a small footprint camera, I have a C300 Mark II. I'm investing in the Mark III relatively soon, potentially the C500 Mark II. I'm not sure which one. Maybe Ian can tell me what you want to do. But at least that one, and then also, I also bring my 5D as a backup. So at least then I have something. But then I'll have, certainly lenses are a big discussion that I'll have with the director about logistics, about like this Lima, Peru project. We didn't have a camera assistant, and we knew we were needing to be very, very mobile, very quick, very small footprint, going into some really rugged. We're doing a lot of hiking. So we decided to go with the C300 with my L series EF Canon zooms. That were very lightweight. I could stick it in a backpack and go. So for that project, that was perfect. Again, on say like the Amira, the voice commercials, the Kohl's commercials, that needed to be. We're doing a lot of follows, a lot of So we decided on the Amira. This country we ended up using. We can talk about this later too, but we used the Mini LF with some Canon Cine servos to give that documentary feel, but also satisfy the network requirements for 4K. So, it's definitely in a dock, there's not the perfect rig. I think it's also important to use gear that you're comfortable with. I think that's a really big issue, is you can't go into a project in Lima, Peru with a new camera. If you do, and if you're required to, then go and talk to Ian and the guys at Abel or any of your preferred rental house, whatever, and get a rundown. Most of the time, whenever I've had a new camera and I've not had any time on it, I literally call the folks at Abel and say, hey, can I come over? There's either one on their sales floor, or the rental guys will pull one. And even now in COVID, there was something that I had done recently that I needed to. Oh, it was a Zoom, a live Zoom, remote Zoom last summer. And we just came and they had the parts and pieces, and we all just kind of sat there for a day in our own COVID safe, room, and we figured it out. So with the help of Abel, we sort of figured it out. But if there's new gear, that's not something you want to take to a remote project. But know your gear, and also it's okay to go a little smaller. I don't think taking more gear is necessarily the better thing. Find what's right for your project, what's right for your budget, what will satisfy your needs for what you're wanting to shoot, and be confident with it too. And certainly you'll learn what you missed and the other thing too is that, like, oftentimes if you're traveling, you'll find, Abel's a great source for sure. I remember actually going to South America with the film shoot. We had a body go down, and he was able to get me a body within a week, which was great. So, but have a local source of gear. That's always a nice backup for sure. But that's a long-winded answer to your question.
No, that's great. What I think is interesting too, as you were talking, I was thinking even in narrative, I often think, like, when you're choosing a camera and lenses, there's this creative decision, aspect. There's the technical aspect of formats that, we have to kind of narrow down what cameras would work for the deliverable. And then there's the logistical too. And in documentary, that's maybe the logistical is even more part of the discussion.
Absolutely. I mean, for sure. I mean, that's it gets down to it. It's like, what do you the other there's another part of it too, that what size of footprint do you want to have? I mean, is it a project where you need to be a smaller footprint for security reasons or for logistics reasons, or if you're shooting inside Imelda Marcos's, Rolls Royce? I don't want to have a big camera because it wouldn't fit in there. Even though, I have show with a big camera in a very small car, but it's not very great. So I mean, just finding what you're shooting. But I think it's figuring out what your footprint needs to be. I mean, sometimes you want a bigger footprint. Sometimes in a project, I was on a project doing a music celebrity, and they wanted to have a big footprint, so we chose the Emira. And that was the way that, and with a larger rig, larger crew, we needed to have a presence. On the other side, on the flip side, if you wanted something that's a little smaller footprint, then you choose a smaller camera. So there's a lot of things when deciding what camera to choose. And again, getting down to it, and all of those things aside, you as a cinematographer, if you're operating, have to be comfortable with the gear, and you have to find rigs that feel comfortable, and that you're not gonna, your neck's not gonna crick, or just find the rig, prep, and just make sure it fits for you, and make sure it works for you, make sure you know the functions of the camera, and make sure you know it like the back of your hand. Because once you get into a documentary world, the last thing you want to think about is your gear. You want to be, for me, I love taking gear that I am absolutely 100% with, because then you focus on the story and emotionally responding to your subject, and really listening and hearing and being there and being present with the scene, versus worrying about, oh, this doesn't really feel right, or that,
Right.
So yeah.
Absolutely. I would love to take a look at some of your work. You've shared some beautiful trailers and clips with us, so we can transition to viewing that. If you would like to give us some of the background, the first one we'd like to take a look at is the 2019 documentary, The Kingmaker. Shana, if you want to give us some intel on that.
Sure. This is the trailer. I don't even know if I should say anything, because it was an incredible experience. I mean, we're spending basically, again, a day in the life with this former wife of the former dictator, and she's literally sort of rewriting history to kind of erase the sins of the past. And it's just remarkable to have spent time with her and see how hard she works to actively forget the past. It's pretty sort of incredulous in a way. So yeah, please enjoy.
Absolutely. All right, take a look.
When I became First Lady, it became demanding for me. I have to dress up and make myself more beautiful, because the poor always looks for a star in the dark of the night.
I don't have an answer for why we allow Imelda to even open her mouth.
The best politician that I've ever seen is my mother.
Her big dream is to restore the greatness of the Marcos family.
It's scary if these people are brought to power again.
I was always criticized for being excessive, but that is mothering.
3,000 pairs of shoes.
Shipping animals from Africa.
Picasso.
Michelangelo.
The demonstrators stormed the gates of the palace to take back what they said was theirs.
There was a big reception. I had to wear jewelry, and we were told, get into the helicopter. So I put diamonds in diapers. It saved us later on to pay lawyers.
Imelda Marcos has gotten away with murder. That case remains unresolved.
Why will I do that? I had nothing against him, except that they talk too much anyway.
The Marcoses scrubbed clean the sins of the past.
Nobody said you can't do it. She came back.
They found no skeletons, only beautiful shoes.
Little did we know they financed the election of Duterte, paving the way for Bongbong Marcos.
People were just taking it too easy, not believing that it was possible.
Like Trump, no one saw Trump coming.
People forget the mistakes of the past, are condemned to repeat them.
I want to mother not only the Philippines, but the world. Nobody can stop me. Perception is real, and the truth is not.
That looks really powerful. That's really great.
Yeah. It was incredible. Like, I mean, that was, I don't know, 14, 15, something like that, maybe 16. I can't really remember. It was shot over several years. And you were asking earlier about cameras. I feel like this was an interesting example of needing to have, this was back before the C300 Mark II came out. So actually it was the C300 first version, where we actually I decided to take a PL version and an EF version to be able to basically have two rigs at the ready. So if Imelda was one to just call us in the morning and say, hey, come along. And we're like, come along where? What are we doing? What are we shooting? We had no idea really what she would do, where she would take us, what it led to. Were we shooting an interview? Were we going in the bus? Were we going in the back of her car? So we had both cameras really at the ready almost all the time. So one was the PL version. We had a 19-90, and I also carried the 85-300, which is a great pair for me. And then again, the smaller C300 with the L series EF lensing, so 24-70, 70-200, even a 16-35 that I'd pop on if I needed to be inside her car. So that was a neat way. Not often the documentaries that I shoot will have the budget to have two full bodies rigged the whole time, but it served us well, because not knowing where we would go every day, we would need to have that flexibility. So.
Yeah, that's such an interesting. I hadn't even thought about that in terms of the documentary work, kind of always being on the ready and not knowing exactly what part of the story you're going to learn about sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a little unnerving, but also once you embrace it, I often liken like scripted TV or features or anything that's narrative as kind of more classical music. I mean, it's written, everybody knows their parts, they come together and they create this amazing sort of symphony, whether it be an upbeat or a, whatever, really that kind of classical piece. Documentaries are more like jazz, I mean, people kind of bring in their own kind of things, and things kind of, you're kind of needing to be flexible. If somebody else goes off this way, you need to kind of react in this way. So I liken it more to jazz in a way that's exciting and thrilling and kind of, again, unnerving. But I love the challenge. I mean, it keeps me on my toes. You're constantly, kind of making decisions in real time about what camera you're going to use, about what lens. And, again, with all the handheld work I've done, you're really kind of vibing out a scene and feeling the scene and how do you cover it. But also then how do you emotionally react to Imelda, who's getting maybe a little agitated or something? How do you back off? There's like a really interesting, not only the technical side of it, but also the emotionally connected kind of vibing the sense of the room or the vibe of the room, part of it that really sort of is all engaging in a really exciting way.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's check in with our audience. Ian, if we have a good question.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. Shana, Ryan is asking, do you ever struggle with interpreting a director's vision or ideas?
Ooh, yes, all the time. I think that's a really great question. And I think often in documentaries and even in the scripted stuff that I've done, there's a constant check-in almost every night. Most of the documentaries that I do, I'm constantly, if I'm able, I scroll through dailies. It's a lot of work, but I often scroll through dailies. A few directors that I work with love to scroll dailies through dailies with me. We talk about what's working, what's not working, what we want to kind of emphasize more. We talk a lot about story, about characters, about story arc, character arc, and also just sort of what worked and what didn't work. I mean, if there was awkward moments for whatever reason, but I think there are times when it's let me take the documentary world. It's sometimes challenging to have directors who think that they have articulated what they want, but then you go and shoot exactly what they want, and then they come back and say, well, actually, that's not what I want. That's not what I meant. And then you have to go and shoot another way, or shoot another, thing. So there's again this sort of jazz kind of reference again, but you're kind of responding and as well as applying your own perspective and your own kind of your own interpretation of what they. But I think it involves a lot of back and forth. I mean, even with directors who I've worked with for years and years and years, there's a constant check-in about, hey, how's this working? Is this working? Is this what you want? And I think you have to be open and willing to take not only positive reinforcement, but also critical critiques and criticism and negative feedback. I think that's incredibly positive. The negative feedback is actually really, really constructive. And negative being, hey, that didn't really work, or that's too dark, or this or that, why'd you do this, or, and you have to certainly find ways to justify what you're doing. But I think there's a constant communication between directors and DPs that has to happen. And if it's not there, it's a little frustrating. You often feel like, you don't know why you're there, or but I'm one that, like, hey, you have to tell me why I'm here. Tell me what the story is. Tell me why we're here. And that will help me, get you what you want. So I think it's a constant kind of stay in communication. And again, even on the scripted stuff I do, there's an obvious kind of script to go by, but there's an interpretation the director has, there's an interpretation that I have. So coming together to bring both of your inputs to best tell the story. And oftentimes, sometimes even in a scripted world, you might want to do it their way. They might want to, only do it their way. But I'm like, hey, can I do it my way? And then I get a chance to do it my way. We'll do multiple takes, and then I'll do seven of theirs and one of mine, and then we'll let the editors choose, which one works best. But the constant communication between your directors and you is absolutely a key.
Do you find you've learned tips along the way, or tools like creating lookbooks or anything in pre-production that helps you stay grounded, or do you have time in the documentaries you've worked on?
Yeah, a lot of times the documentaries I've been really fortunate to work with directors who I've worked with in the past, and so we have our past collaborative pieces that we talk about, like, hey, let's do Lauren Greenfield as an example, or Jessica Yu, both women I've worked with on several projects, and so we reference our past work together, which is great. Often we, if it's a new director, we have lengthy conversations. Hey, what about this doc? Or these are the, oftentimes we're talking about maybe the look of an interview. So I put together, I have frame grabs from my own interviews, as well as frame grabs of other great looking interviews from other work. Some people I know, some people I don't know, and I've just randomly, grabbed great looking interviews. And then it starts the dialogue about what works and what doesn't work for that particular piece. I think that's important to know too, or important to remember, that creating or deciding on a visual style with your director on any given project, documentary, scripted, whatever. I think every project has its own kind of style, its own aesthetic, and I think only through those pre-production discussions and looking at work, looking at your own work, looking at other people's work, you really start to hone in, and also shooting a few things, and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. That you start to continue to dial in your own unique aesthetic for that project. For this country, and also the several scripted projects that I've done, it's super important. And not only do you do like kind of a lookbook in your meeting to get the job, which is kind of an interesting thing, because you kind of need to know a little bit more about the project, about what they're doing, and then you can kind of go put a lookbook together, and that begins to start the dialogue about what the aesthetic is for that particular project. But on This Country, which was the Fox series, the half-hour comedy series that I just did with Paul Feig, Jenny Bix, the showrunner, and Paul and I came up with it's called like a visual Bible, that basically sets forth these rules that we sort of adhered to. We also broke a few of our own rules, but shot in a documentary style, but it's all scripted. So we had rules that we tried to adhere to that stuck to very traditional verite rules. Meaning that we couldn't jump cameras into, we were outside and somebody shuts a door, we can't automatically cut inside the door, because wait a minute, how did the camera automatically just jump in we either would have to follow a character into a house, which we did often, so there are rules here and there that we again broke. But I think having a specific, visual Bible for each project is also a good idea. Yeah.
Right.
They're fun to put together too, because it's like, you put it together, and also you can, again, these are just, guidelines. But it's fun. It's fun to create a language for a project. And I think on This Country, the documentary vibe of that film, or that series, actually gives it a unique perspective, and people think it's real. And I think they relate to the characters more because it's shot in this documentary style. So I think I'm super excited for people to see it. It's funny as heck. So I'm excited for people to see it.
That's awesome.
Shana, we have one additional question in that vein. Billy Yates is asking, how do you approach collaborating with other DPs when being brought on for additional cinematography? Beyond seeing footage, what is important to you in those conversations?
That's a really good, nowadays, especially with COVID, back in my early days, I was sole DP on most of my projects. Nowadays, it's really challenging because documentaries are shot over, many months, if not many years, sometimes decades. And so there are several cinematographers on a single project. Oftentimes when I'm the first DP, I will set up a style guide. I'll put together a document that has samples from our interviews, as well as, I'll have production send incoming DPs, say there's a project or there's a conflict or I can't go, or it's easier for them to hire somebody that's local in Europe. There was a project that I was on recently that it was a day shoot in Vienna, Austria, and it was just not cost prohibitive to send me there. And so I said, okay, I'm going to put a lookbook together. I'm going to put a style guide together. So that style guide is about framing, about the coverage style. They see footage as well as what you mentioned. That's a key. But also I often also talk about how we've covered a scene. There is a certain, I think everybody in the documentary world kind of can think traditional documentary verite is one way of shooting things. But say, for instance, director likes to, or in this particular film, we like to hold on wide shots, or we like to tell a story in details. This particular film I was talking about with the One Day in Vienna, we're shooting a conductor. And one of the things we like to do is show her hands conducting, and also when she was writing notes. So, I mean, it just sort of, her hands were basically the method through which she was conducting using her hands. And so we had a focus on hands. So I would discuss that, talk about the importance of like, okay, in a scene, let's focus, be a little more hand centric if you could, so certain things that you've picked up along the way, you kind of, I think it only benefits the film. I think that's another thing to think about, is that, somebody's not coming in and taking over your film. They're shooting something that, has your name or maybe both of your names on it. So you want it to be the best it can be. So the more information, I think, the better. Absolutely.
That's great. I would love to take a look now at your next clip that you've shared with us. And I was thinking earlier when you were talking about jazz, I think that's such a great analogy of jazz and the orchestra. And then it made me think of, you've got another Academy Award nominated short, Walk, Run, Cha Cha. So a little bit more of a music context there. You want to intro that clip for us?
Yeah, this is just a clip. I think it's a little bit longer piece that was nominated for an Academy Award last year. It's a profile of a couple who met in Vietnam and were separated for many, many years, and met up again back in the U.S. and rediscovered their love for each other on the dance floor.
Love it. Take a look.
Before I learned dancing, I can only use my body to walk, to swim, to run. Today, I can use my body to reach another level of freedom.
I wish I could have danced earlier at my age, but better late than never. We're lucky to have an opportunity and the right time, maybe the last time.
Okay. So that was just a short little bit of Walk, Run, Cha Cha. We had some fun with slow-mo there in the dance in the Cha Cha class. They were great. It was really fun. New York Times Op Docs produced it, and I think the whole film's on YouTube if you'd like to see it. But I think that was another one where the experience was so great because it's shot in Alhambra, California, at a dance hall that is mostly Chinese, Vietnamese, older semi-retired and retired couples that go and dance, and they have these dance classes. And the director, Laura Nix, discovered this, and it's just sort of this fun world to kind of explore. And she met this couple, and it's kind of retelling their love story. It's really sweet.
That's really great.
Yeah.
I love how it has kind of this simple context, but yet I'm sure, and I can't wait to see it, there's more to the history of their relationship and everything that they went through. So
yeah, it's really sweet. It was a great experience. Yeah.
Let's take a look at your next clip. Tell us a little bit about this one before we take a look at it.
Yeah, so this is
James Turrell.
Yeah, this is a film called James Turrell, You Who Look. Jessica, you directed it. Jessica actually directed the Oscar-winning Breathing Lessons that I had done. So she and I had worked together for over 25 years. James Turrell, I think, was our most recent collaboration a few years ago. James Turrell is a light artist, and it was intimidating at first to kind of go forth with a documentary about a person who uses light as his medium. How do you photograph art and light? And his work literally is experiential. And so how do you approach a project visually with cinematography that is trying to document art that is based on the experience of the viewer? So that was the challenge. But also, like, we knew that his interview was going to be in black and white. Jessica decided that, and I think it was a great idea for sure. So we wanted to really sort of, you'll see in the we can talk about lighting afterwards, but anyway, let's just show the clip and then we can talk after. One thing I will say is, like, sitting with James Turrell in the interview, we did about 3.5, 4 hours of interview with him, and it literally was like sitting with Ansel Adams. He literally is a genius at what he does, and his theories about light and touching with light are pretty remarkable. So enjoy the clip.
Maybe.
You don't form it like clay. You don't carve it away like wood or stone. It's more like sound, like dealing with sound. So you make an instrument that produces it the way you want.
Hey, hon, may I have some more water? Thanks.
When the eye has less light, it opens. And it's not until the pupil opens that feeling comes out of the eyes as touch. Then you're really touching with light. That's why I have many spaces you have to go into and you don't see for 10 minutes. So without focus, without image, without object, what are you left with? You can be left with actually seeing your seeing, or really feeling how you go about seeing and how you make this and create this reality that you then live within. Often the eyes will even create form when it's not there. I've even been sued by people who fell to the floor of the museum. In the Whitney show, a woman's testimony was there was this wall, I leaned against it, and it wasn't there. Well, I do think you should stand up to contemporary art.
So I love James Turrell. I mean, I just honestly, it's like Santa Claus and Ansel Adams all rolled into one. It was so wonderful to hear his perspective on light, working with light and touching and feeling with light, and his perspectives on color temperature and perception. And I mean, just like literally mind blowing. This film is basically a profile on Rodent Crater, which was one of his life's work. Basically, it's even self-proclaimed life's work in northern Arizona. This piece actually also you can see on YouTube. It was commissioned by LACMA, the LA County Museum of Art. A lot of these actually, a fair amount of these are, this one's particularly a still, but we did some drone work. We really wanted to kind of capture the scope and the scale of this piece. He goes on to talk about, he wanted to start with get a head start on his pre-made ruin. And it's an extinct volcanic crater that he decided. So he's got caverns and caves inside this volcanic crater that he's creating these almost these passage tombs. It's pretty amazing. But to show the scale and scope of the thing, we obviously chose a drone. And I don't do much drone work in my documentary work, but when you do, I feel like it has to be to show scale and to show this massive project that he's undertaking. But when done well, we had a local crew out of I believe out of Phoenix, but they did a fantastic job. Just the day after this, we did some other drone stuff where we were trying to do some night stuff, and they lost one of the drones. But this footage fortunately survived. So,
perfect.
Yeah, that was an amazing project. Again, a great experience to work with Jessica, who I'd worked with for 20 plus years, to be able to have sort of a shorthand after working together on so many projects, and also to work with James. It was amazing. It's a fantastic project.
I'd love to hear more about. We've talked a little bit about camera, so we'd love to hear about, what kind of tools and techniques you've learned with lighting, especially in documentary, but also in scripted. So let's check in with our audience and see if there's some lighting questions we could tie in here.
Shana, you're being asked, how do you approach lighting for documentary, and how can you find a balance in keeping a consistent exposure, but still move fast? And do you always light your scenes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say certainly 90% of the time I'm lighting an interview. Oftentimes, if it's a fast, quick, on the fly type interview where somebody is beautifully lit with this natural light on their coffee table, and I don't need to throw a light in, and we're doing it for maybe 20, 30 minutes, and I know the light's not going to change, I'm happy to embrace that natural light. The subject not only feels better, but also like it's just, I think my personal opinion is that the less gack, the less like production stuff you bring into somebody's house, the less it feels like they need to perform for your camera. And so I'm a stickler about that. But if I can use natural light, absolutely. It not only makes it sort of easier to kind of shoot 360, you don't have stands or gack or anything that potentially could damage or ruin any kind of vibe that you've got going on with a subject. It just feels more natural and feels more authentic. And so certainly for interviews, like the James Turrell interview, we actually shot that at Rodin Crater in a almost 360 degree. There's windows all around, sort of black the entire room out. We were really hoping to have just a very, very high contrast, almost Richard Avedon, like with a black background, portrait light on him, with very little fill, knowing we'd go black and white. So that was a very specific choice, and we brought in lights from Phoenix, whatever. And again, most interviews I will light, but honestly, I don't light a lot of my scenes. If a documentary, I use the example of a scene that I shot for a film that I worked with on called Married in America, directed by Michael Apt, the late Michael Apted. And there's a scene, it's a film called Married in America, about married couples. One of the couples that we were shooting, this was, 15 years ago now, had a stepson or I think it was a foster son who was probably 6 years old. And they didn't have any room for him. They had been moved around. They were sort of former addicts and really struggling to kind of keep a roof over their heads, let alone like a foster kid. And they didn't have a bedroom for him, but they created this bedroom in the living room out of like 2x4s. And they put a mattress and a pillow and a lamp. And it was pretty dark. And we needed a shot of it. And even Michael and I were like, we can't light it. We can't, the lighting of that scene, the meaning of that scene for me was just the light source from this one single light bulb. That was to me the way, if I had lit that scene, even the producer was like, don't you want to throw a little light up? I was like, no, because I feel like that would have ruined the authenticity of the scene. And so for me, I think it's a key to kind of, so I shot the guy who was the little kid, the 8-year-old, was like reading a book, using this one light bulb, in a sort of wide shot of the corner of the world that they've built for him. And that told a story. The fact that it was a little dark and had one little single light bulb with, I think it didn't even have a light shade, or a lamp shade, but that told the story more authentically than if I had lit it. So I'm kind of a stickler for not lighting my documentary scenes unless it's absolutely necessary to see a subject. Another example is that I actually, in Argentina, there was a scene where we needed to shoot something inside. It was pouring rain outside. We had planned to shoot outside, but there was no light inside, but there was one light socket and they didn't have a light bulb. And they said, well, we can't afford light bulbs. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, electricity's, and they actually did have a light bulb, but it was out. So we went to the corner store, bought a light bulb, plugged it in. That was the only light source. And I think if I had brought in my lights and kind of lit it up, there was actually no power, so we couldn't have used our own lights. But I think the authenticity of that lighting, just from that single source, was a little underexposed, but I feel like that was authentic to the scene. So I think I really try to stay true to the natural, boosting. If I do need to boost it, I boost natural sources, boost a window light or boost an overhead light, but I usually try to keep things authentic. That also protects like the room. So you could shoot 360 degrees. So you don't, I think in most documentaries, you like to be able to kind of shoot, you don't have to, worry about shooting around light stands. So
right, absolutely. And you're kind of taking, especially if you're letting your character take the lead a little, you want them to be able to have freedom, move around, show you what they want to show you. So that makes sense.
Exactly. Like, and one thing I've learned too is that you start to learn to use that natural light to your advantage. So if you want to have somebody actually be silhouette, you find a way to shoot into that window and silhouette them, or you find a way to shoot the window at your back or the window to your side, using that beautiful side light, on them as they're washing dishes or something. You find the beauty in the natural light. You use it to your advantage versus thinking it's a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely.
It's my theory. Certainly my theory. There's no rules about this. So that's my take on it.
Right. Let's take a look at your next clip, your Queen of Versailles. Do you want to intro that one a little bit? Go ahead, we can roll that one. This is Queen of Versailles.
I'm gonna go look at our new house, okay?
Look at this thing. Oh my God.
We went to France and we saw Versailles, and we were inspired by the French architecture.
I drew it on the back of an envelope on my way to Las Vegas. In Las Vegas, we looked out our window and we kind of copied the top 3 floors of the Paris Hotel. Probably should have used smaller envelopes because it turned out to be the largest home in America.
We never sought out to build the biggest house in America. It's like kind of happened.
This is so beautiful.
This is our grand ballroom. We have the grand staircase on each end.
It's a palace. Can you imagine like the dances and the parties?
I said, well, I'd like to have a bowling alley. And then he says, I want a health spa. And then I said, we need maids' quarters. I forgot how many kitchens, 10 kitchens. We have a sushi bar.
2 tennis courts, 1 will be a stadium court.
So by the time we both got what we wanted, now it's 90,000 square feet.
This is so pretty. This is like the nicest, grandest house in all of the United States, right here.
So that was an amazing project. Again, one that I'd worked with Lauren Greenfield, who is another longtime collaborator, amazing director. You know, she and I've done several projects together, and that was just a pure observational, like, you have to be, yeah, it was actually a really good example of it. I couldn't light like the construction site. You know, you were just using the natural light to kind of help tell your story. Yeah, the Queen of Versailles and the Seagulls were another amazing kind of life experience, seeing a day in the life of the uber wealthy. Pretty impressive.
I would love to touch just a little bit on, you mentioned it earlier about being a female cinematographer. And I know when we talked in our prep call, you talked about a couple experiences that you've had where maybe, you felt that you could see why, your personality, not just being a female, obviously, but your personality, impacted that documentary differently than maybe if it had been someone else. So if you could just talk a little bit, because I'm sure some people in our audience are wondering what that experience has been like for you, if it's been different or challenging or things you've learned.
Yeah. Well, I get asked that question all the time, and I feel like, honestly, I'm a cinematographer that happens to be a woman. I don't necessarily think that we need to label, female cinematographers. We just happen to be artists and cinematographers that happen to be women. Same thing. You don't call a black cinematographer. I think we all see the world differently. We all come with unique perspectives, valued and respected and needed diverse voices. That I think that's the reason that I just do what I do. I don't know. I come as a woman, and so I can add that to my how I approach my work. I just do my work. I just do my thing. I happen to be a woman. The story I like to tell is Shakespeare Behind Bars was a documentary that I'd shot in the early 2000s. It was at Sundance in 2005, and it was a film about a group of inmates at a prison in Kentucky that do Shakespeare, and we spent about a week a month for about a year in this men's prison. Yeah, there's me with the guys. We really got to know these guys. We really got to spend so much time, and we were not only in rehearsals. They casted themselves according to their crimes. So rapists play rapists, murderers play murderers, and so on. The guys are playing the female roles. A very, very traditional Shakespearean troupe. And we'd spent time with guys rehearsing, but also we'd spend time with guys, checking their mail and doing the laundry and like rehearsing lines and working out in the yard. And we just really spent a day in the life with these guys, and we got to know them. And I think, a question was asked at Sundance, what was it like being a woman in the men's prison? And I said, well, gosh, it was great to be able to, to tell these guys stories. But also I think in hindsight, and I don't think that the guys would have opened up to us in the way that they did. I mean, they were open up. They were telling us all about their crimes and their issues and their struggles with, forgiving themselves and just sort of redemption and all the themes of the play. They did The Tempest the year we were there, which is just, if you know the play, the themes are redemption and and forgiveness. And so it was perfect, and also set on an island, which is again a prison metaphor. But I don't think, I mean, they really opened up to us emotionally, and I don't know that they would have done that if I were a man. So I feel like it would have been a different film, certainly if it was a male cinematographer. So in those ways, and sometimes it is important to remember that I'm not saying that men are not emotional and connected to their emotions. And certainly there are many, many men that are empathetic and sympathetic and can really bring that sort of emotional connection to their work. But I feel like I'm a very emotional creature. I'm very connected to people. I make them feel at ease quite quickly. I think those traits, whether or not I'm just that kind of person or because I'm female, that's what I bring to the table. And I believe that shows in the work, especially in Shakespeare Behind Bars. I feel like, it definitely shows. I think also on Survivor, I was the first woman to shoot on Survivor. And I think that I was talking to producers and they were like, why do you want to do this? And I said, because I'd like to challenge myself, and also because there's not been a woman there. And when they started to see the footage, they realized that and I got the loveliest compliment. They said, look, you have a female perspective. You're seeing things and you're telling stories from a different perspective than the rest of our shooters. Not to say that their perspectives were bad, but it's a different perspective. And so I appreciated that comment that, I was coming and looking at stories and looking at characters in a different way than the men were. So I thought that was a great compliment. So
I think it's a great takeaway. It's like being aware, but not making it something that overly concerns you that's going to stop you from your goals, right? It's kind of like a
absolutely.
nice, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
great.
certainly, yeah.
Let's check in with our audience. We're getting towards the end here, so I want to make sure we get some questions in. Ian, take it away.
Thank you. Shauna, Nicole is asking you, what advice would you give to someone who wants to grow in their technical skills and eventually level up in the camera department if they aren't in school?
That's a good question. Depending on if you're certainly in a doc environment or in a scripted environment, I'm assuming maybe this is a scripted question. I would say similar to what my Be First on This Country did. Let your people who are above you know that you want to learn new skills. And they will take you under their wing. And most people will just say, absolutely, here, come earlier, come after call, let's stay after call and I'll show you how this works. Or, on a downtime or when the, B camera's not working, we can, here, put it on your shoulder and, let's knock it out and see how it feels. I think learning from the people around you, the people that you trust and that you love and that love you, it's all about support. Again, it takes a village. So I think asking for help, asking for assistance and guidance from the people who you work with, and also just again letting them know, like the B camera first, like I didn't know he could operate. I didn't even know. I had no idea that he had a reel, that's up on Vimeo already. I was like super impressed, and until he told me about it. So I think being vocal with the people that you're working with and saying, hey, I'd really like to do this. I would like to be considered for this. And then after I saw his reel and after I talked to him and after I talked to production, everybody's like, absolutely, let's give him a chance. And he delivered. He totally delivered. So I think when given chances like that, I think you have to be ready. You have to be mentally ready, but also technically ready to, to jump up. But be confident in yourself too. I mean, and take a chance on yourself, and it's okay to ask for help. In the documentary world, I think again, taking back to my mentor's advice, if you want to go shoot, then shoot. If you want to direct, go direct. If you want to edit or AC or media load or data manage or whatever, DIT, whatever, just go and do it. Find a way, find a project, a low budget or a do it yourself, go and do something else. Just go and try to find a way to do it. And you'll gain the confidence and the knowledge to then say, hey, this is what I do. So it's just about sort of taking chances, but also being confident in yourself.
Absolutely. Ian, go ahead with another one from an audience.
Thank you. Adrian Smith is asking, as someone who's been shooting lifestyle and reality TV for around 10 years, but really wants to shoot feature docs, more narrative work, any tips for bridging those gaps?
I would say, I think it's oftentimes networking. It's sort of like, I don't ever want to say it's who you know, but it's also, it's who's in your network. So I feel like the more you can tell the world that you want to do something, the more the world comes back to you. So sometimes I even suggest to people, like, literally even to your own group of contacts, say, hey, this is what I'm after. Like, I would really like to shoot a doc. If you know anybody, if you know anybody that is needing a doc shooter that, hey, they don't have any money, or they're doing a pitch reel, or they're doing a, presentation or a proof of concept or something. I'm your person, then they know that you're looking. So I think it's until you kind of put it out there in the world, or not until you put it out there in the world, do people really know kind of what you're wanting. And also, I think helps solidify for you what you want to do. But so that's one thing, is I spread the word. I try to also, if I'm slow or whatever, I just spread the word and say, hey, if you or anybody else and then eventually that plants a seed in people's brain, oh, well, Jeff needs a job, or then they think of you. They sort of that's a nice way to kind of get your desires spread out in the world. Another thing is, at least in the feature documentary world, there's a group called the International Documentary Association, and before COVID, they often have a screening series that would have screening documentaries, and they have Q&As afterwards. So that's a great way to network. IDA also has mixers, they have tech days, they have lots of events that post-COVID, hopefully when we all get vaccinated and things kind of calm down a little bit and we're actually able to do things in person, it's a really great way. And also IDA has some online classes as well, but just becoming part of that network will allow you to be introduced to documentary filmmakers that are looking for crew people. So that's one other way to kind of get involved in that network.
That's great. Those are good takeaways for our audience. Shana, I wanted to ask you, and I know some of our audience is asking this as well, especially with your career, it sounds like you've traveled the world, which is so amazing, and continue to do so. And what are tools that you've learned, or tips to balance the, life-work balance? I think all filmmakers or creatives are always trying to figure out. And so what are some things that you've learned that help you, along the way?
Mm-hmm. This is always the struggle. It's always the balance. I think in a larger career sense, I often try to have a balance between jobs that feed my belly and feed my soul. If there are too many jobs that are feeding my belly, I get fat and I get like my brain just, I'm just not fulfilled. If I have jobs that feed my soul, often those jobs don't pay that well. So then I starve, I mean, figuratively. But I think it's having a balance of jobs that feed my belly and feed my soul. And if I can maintain that kind of balance, I feel like I'm happiest. And oftentimes in my downtime, I am connecting with nature. I mean, that's my kind of reset. I find my gardening and my focusing on my relationships and my animals and my partner, and spending time with him and the animals and the backyard garden, and going for hikes and walks and just staying out in nature really reconnects me with kind of the world around me, and kind of levels things out. But I also am also inspired, and I try to watch people's work, and I watch television, Ted Lasso and all the other great series and great work that's out there. Lots of amazing documentaries that are out there. I get inspired every time I watch something that inspires me. You want to do something like that, or be involved with something like that, or you find an idea, or you find or even just you laugh, or you smile, or you cry, and you're just inspired by the content around you. So there's several ways that I kind of keep balanced, but it's hard. It's really hard. I mean, the episodic world is incredibly hard, and even a documentary environment is really hard. What we do is really, really hard, but I feel like it's worthwhile. And I think if you love doing what you do, the hard part just kind of is just part of what you do. It just kind of comes with it, and finding that balance and making sure you have a whatever it is that makes you happy at your home, at your house, at your spending time with friends or whatever. Then you just sort of focus on that on your downtime, and just
I love that.
Maintain some balance.
Right. That's beautiful, because, this talk has been about inspiration. So we started out talking about things that inspired you. You're definitely inspiring our audience members and us that are all listening and partaking in this. So thank you so much for that. And I love that you said be in nature. And what I took away there is also just be present, kind of recognize that you're experiencing this life, and then you're going to put that back into your filmmaking. That's so great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things, that I really appreciate is that, when you're out in nature, you see these, beautiful light, like the morning, or, and what you feel from, if I was out in my garden the other day, we're just about ready to plant our tomatoes and just trying to figure out, what to plant where and whatever. But it was just a beautiful, beautiful light. And I was just feeling this sort of warmth and just the quality of the light and where direction it was coming from. And I just sort of mentally put that in the back of my mind. Like if I needed to recreate that, or if I needed to, for a scripted environment, say, needed to have that same kind of vibe from a shot or from a scene, I would want to shoot it at this time of day and this time of the year and this with this light. I mean, you're always constantly kind of checking in with the inspirations around you, and like you said, being present and being mindful of what's around you and how it makes you feel can certainly not only satisfy you in those moments and just really just make you relax, but also inform your work later, which is, my work and my life kind of are fused together. And I think as artists, we have the joy of finding light and art and beauty in the world around us, but also, finding time for ourselves that is not about work is
Right.
important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Shana. Before we end here, tell us what is next for you. I know you just wrapped This Country, and is that going to be available soon? Or tell the audience, what to expect next from you.
Yeah. So This Country is, again, 14 episodes of really funny half-hour comedy with some newcomers and some established actors, but mostly newcomers, shot in a documentary style. It'll be on Fox, hopefully in the fall. Directed by Paul Feig, Bridesmaids and Creeks and Geeks, and Jenny Bix, who was involved with, she wrote The Greatest Showman and was on Sex and the City for a long time, or show running for Sex and the City for many years, but lots of chops behind that show. So really, really looking forward to the world seeing that. It's really, really funny. Again, shot in this sort of documentary style, so I feel it's sort of near and dear to my heart. It's a great job for me because it really, I was firing on all cylinders, and it used my entire skill set, not only the documentary stuff that I've done, but the scripted and there's a lot of improv. So it just ticks all the boxes for me. So it was a really fantastic work experience as well. Shot outside Wilmington for doubling a small town in Ohio. So it'll be fun. It'll be on in the fall. My next gig is actually, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, was that one on the Airy Mini LF? I was just thinking of that like level of production, for that style as well.
Yes, we're on the Mini LF. Most networks are adhering to the Netflix rules that things have to be at least 4K. So the Mini LF with I think it's an IBE adapter, the 1.3 adapter, 1.3, 1.4 adapter to let us use the Super 35 lenses that the Canon Cine Servo, the 17-120, and we sort of embraced the 25 to 250, which is amazing because we could still handhold that and do our spy shots and some long lens stuff handheld, crazy enough, on that long lens. But that gave us the documentary vibe that we needed for that series, and it felt like a doc rig, but we were shooting scripted, so it was great hybrid. And coming up next is also not really documentary style, but certainly hybrid. There's a lot of doc observational handheld stuff. It's a new Duplass Brothers series called Somebody Somewhere. It'll be shot outside Chicago, also another small town that will be doubling for a small town in Kansas, starring Bridget Everett, who's a really funny lady, and it'll be another half-hour comedy for HBO.
That's great. Yeah. Well, Shana, thank you so much for joining us. You've been really inspiring. I loved hearing everything. I know our audience did as well. So thank you so much for your time and sharing everything that you've learned with us.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I just wish everybody the best of luck. Stay happy and healthy, stay inspired, and keep doing what you're doing. I think perseverance is a huge part of what we do. Just stick with it, and good things will come.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's a great takeaway. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and we will catch you next time.